The FBI and Secret Service were called in, and UFC President Dana White personally put up a massive reward for any information. The entire MMA world held its breath, because the missing girl was the beloved daughter of UFC heavyweight fighter Walt Harris. That night, she was just driving home from a funeral. She was exhausted and pulled into a well-lit gas station for literally 2 minutes to grab a snack. Less than 48 hours later, her battered SUV would be found miles away, with the passenger side covered in blood. What followed was a web of strange Snapchat messages, confusing accounts from eyewitnesses who saw the abduction but chose not to get involved, and a massive manhunt for the killer in the Florida woods. Today, we're looking at a case where the victim was a fighter's daughter, and her killer turned out to be someone who should have never been on the streets in the first place. This is a story of senseless brutality and a legal loophole that a whole state had to rewrite their constitution to fix. Hey everyone! Before we dive in, if you're into true crime documentaries, please show some love by liking and subscribing. And let me know in the comments, do you think violent offenders should ever be allowed out on bail? Picture a vibrant, 19-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her. That was Anaya Blanchard. Growing up in Homewood, Alabama, Anaya was the definition of a bright light. She was super close with her family, but her bond with her brother, Elijah Jr., was on a whole different level. These two were only 7 months apart, literally best friends since day one. Now, their family dynamic was a bit unique, but honestly, it was pure goals. Their dad, Elijah Sr., was a pastor and a local businessman, and even after he and their mom, Angela, split back in 2004, the family didn't fracture. They actually stayed incredibly tight-knit. Angela, who worked around the clock as a nurse, later tied the knot with UFC heavyweight legend Walt Harris. Meanwhile, Elijah Sr. remarried Yoshiba, a probate judge over in Jefferson County. You'd think with that many moving parts, things might get messy, right? But no, everyone got along beautifully. Anaya and Elijah Jr. entered Walt's life when they were just 3 years old, and to him the word stepkid didn't even exist. He straight up said, "I never called them stepchildren. They were my kids, period. I loved them like my own flesh and blood." Okay, can we just pause for a second? Hearing a legendary UFC fighter talk about his bonus kids like that, it honestly melts my heart. It is so rare to see blended families navigate life with that much genuine love and zero friction. Walt even mentioned that Anaya was his absolute biggest fan. If he won a match, she was right there hyping him up. If he lost, she was the first one to lift his spirits. She was his absolute rock, always keeping him grounded. And honestly, that was just Anaya in a nutshell. Totally nurturing, selfless, and always putting everyone else first. Since her mom worked those grueling nursing shifts, Anaya naturally stepped up as she got older, helping Walt look after her 2 younger siblings. On top of being a total sweetheart, she was insanely athletic, killing it in both softball and cheerleading. By the time college rolled around, she had a ton of options on her radar, art, business, you name it. But by late 2019, she was living in Auburn, Alabama, attending Southern Union College, and she finally found her true calling, early childhood education. She wanted to shape young minds as a teacher. To make things even better, her brother Elijah was just a few blocks away at Auburn University, so the dynamic duo was still hanging out constantly. Anaya moved into an apartment with her roommate Sarah, adopted an adorable shelter pup named Blue, and was fully vibing with her newfound independence. She was juggling classes, working, and living her best life. Which brings us to the 23rd of October 2019. Anaya and Elijah Jr. had to make a massive 180-mile trek from Hamilton back to Auburn after attending a funeral. As soon as the service wrapped up, Anaya was incredibly eager to hit the road. It was a brutal 4-hour drive, and both of them had to be up early for work the next morning. About halfway through the trip, They made a quick pit stop past Birmingham to check in on Walt, who was in the zone training for his next big fight. Walt actually begged them to just crash there for the night. Anaya looked absolutely exhausted, but she smiled and shrugged it off, saying, "No, I'm totally fine, Dad. I've got this." She gave him a big hug, and they hit the highway again. By the time Anaya and Elijah Jr. finally rolled back into Auburn, it was around 11 p.m. She pulled up to his place, dropped him off, and he told her to hit him up as soon as she got back to her own apartment, which was only about 3 miles away. I don't know about you guys, but I know that exact level of exhaustion. You're practically driving on autopilot, counting down the minutes until your head hits the pillow. Elijah could see how wiped out she was, which is why he explicitly told her to go straight home. The day had been heavy both emotionally and physically. So, the second Elijah walked through his front door, he completely crashed and went straight to sleep. He had no idea that would be the last time he'd ever see his sister look at him. At 11:09 p.m., her roommate, Sarah, shot her a text. "Are you close to being home?" Anaya replied instantly, "Yeah." Now, Sarah and Anaya actually shared their real-time locations on their phones, and this next part is vital to understand because it shows just how cautious Anaya really was. Guys, this isn't just a case of someone being careless. Sarah later admitted that Anaya was actually hyper-vigilant. She had this deep-seated, intense fear of being targeted or abducted. Like, to the point where she would obsessively double-check every single room and lock the doors multiple times. She even suffered from vivid nightmares about something terrible happening to her. Because of that anxiety, she made it a strict rule never to go anywhere by herself, especially in the dead of night. So keep that in mind as we look at what happens next, because her behavior suddenly takes a total 180. About 30 minutes passed and Sarah hadn't heard another peep. Growing a bit curious, Sarah hopped onto Snapchat and messaged her again. "Did you go out without me?" Roughly 60 seconds later, Anaya's account typed back a reply. "I'm smoking a blunt, lol." Sarah was immediately taken aback. She had never heard Anaya say anything like this before, and something about the use of the word blunt just felt completely off and totally out of character to her. Like, when you know your best friend inside out, you instantly notice when the vibe shifts. Sarah knew how Anaya talked, and this just wasn't her. It immediately set off red flags. Why would a girl who was literally terrified of the dark and never went anywhere alone suddenly send a message like that? It made zero sense, and Sarah's gut told her that someone else was holding that phone. "Who are you smoking with?" she asked. "Eric," she replied. "I just met him." "Where?" Sarah asked. No reply. It was now just before midnight. Sarah checked her phone one last time for Anaya's location, and it looked like she was at a nearby apartment complex that mostly housed college students. Assuming Anaya had just gone on an impromptu night out to hang out with friends, Sarah went to bed. The next morning, the red flags started piling up. Elijah Jr. woke up to 0 missed calls, which was completely unlike her. At 8 a.m., Angela tried to FaceTime Anaya, but she didn't pick up. Meanwhile, Sarah bounded into Anaya's room, waiting to hear all the tea about the night out and this mystery guy, Eric. But her room was completely empty and untouched. It now seemed like Anaya's phone was either totally dead or someone had turned off her location sharing. Sarah called Elijah Jr., told him that Anaya clearly never made it home, and mentioned the name Eric. Elijah said his heart just dropped. Honestly, I get it, they were best friends. There is absolutely no way she would have gone back out to meet someone without telling him. She just wouldn't. They both spoke to a local lady named Karina, whose kids Anaya babysat for. There was no way she would have missed work, yet here they were. As Sarah drove around looking for Anaya's car, it was time for her family to make that dreaded phone call to the police. 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard was officially reported missing. Walt and Angela got straight on the road for what had to be the longest, most agonizing 2-hour journey of their lives. I can't even imagine the panic rushing through them. Investigators initially said there was no evidence of a criminal act, but this was just so out of character. Nobody believed she had just decided to drop off the grid. 48 hours later, her black Honda SUV was recovered at Park Place Apartments in Montgomery, Alabama, 55 miles away from her home. The car was badly scratched up and dented, and more alarmingly still, there was a significant amount of blood inside it. It's absolutely terrifying to even think about. Because of where the car was found, searches were now focused on Auburn, Montgomery, and the nearly 60 miles in between. It was a massive area to cover.
Anaya's hometown of Homewood has not stopped in their efforts to raise awareness for Anaya. The senior pastor here at Trinity United Methodist says Anaya's mother and stepfather are in need of prayers right now as their strength is being challenged.
5 days later, with still zero clues, everyone held a vigil, hoping and praying for answers. Around 200 people gathered at her old church back home as well. Karina, whom Anaya babysat for, said she tried to be as honest as possible with her 3 young kids. She told them Anaya was missing, but everyone was searching for her, so hopefully she'd be back soon. Later on, Karina noticed her kids looking up how many houses were in the area on their tablets. When she asked why, they said, "We need to know how many houses we have to go to find her." Honestly, that just breaks my heart into a million pieces. It shows how deeply loved Anaya was by everyone around her, even the little ones. As the search entered its second week, investigators had received hundreds of tips, and the reward for information hit $15,000. Even UFC President Dana White donated to support Walt and Angela. A massive 70-member task force involving multiple agencies, including the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and Homeland Security, was now working tirelessly to locate her. But then, a closer examination of her car revealed something chilling. The passenger side contained most of the blood, and there was a bullet hole right in the passenger door. Tests confirmed it was Anaya's blood, and authorities stated the sheer volume found indicated that someone had suffered a life-threatening injury. I cannot even fathom the absolute dread her family felt hearing that. Yet, her father, Elijah Sr., said that as a man of faith, he simply could not accept the worst. He had to keep believing she was coming home, despite everything pointing in such an awfully different, tragic direction.
What they're telling us is that they know that she was harmed in the car.
Blanchard's parents even meeting with the mother of Natalie Holloway, who vanished on a high school graduation trip to Aruba in 2005 and has never been found.
That's my baby girl, so I'm a fighter by nature. It's not just my profession. I've been battling all my life, and I'm not going to stop battling for her right now.
Walt described it as a dark abyss that just clings to you, a total heaviness you're constantly trying to fight off. Honestly, I can't even imagine trying to process that kind of pain. But then, investigators finally got a lead. Anaya's license plates were traced back to a Chevron gas station in Auburn, which was just minutes away from her apartment. She had walked into the gas station right before 11:30 p.m. and was only inside for a couple of minutes. She bought a drink and a pack of sour cream chips, which Angela mentioned was her absolute favorite flavor. Like, why would a girl who was literally terrified of going out alone at night make this random stop so close to home? It makes you wonder if she was completely fine in that moment, or if something had already forced her to change her routine.
Tonight, the search is intensifying for 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard. This surveillance video shows the last time she was seen, more than a week ago, late at night, inside this Auburn convenience store. Police found her car 2 days later, damaged and parked at an apartment complex in Montgomery.
There's about 50 miles between Auburn and Montgomery, and so we're looking at that area specifically as the critical area where something took place.
Police say evidence inside her car points to foul play.
I love her so much, and I want her back so bad. And so I'm going to hold out hope.
Anaya's father says, watching the surveillance video, something about his daughter seemed off.
It was almost like somebody told her to do something.
What was so unusual about her body language?
She was she looked kind of distant.
Alabama officials are offering more than $100,000 reward for any information in Anaya's case, thanks in large part to an outpouring of donations from the UFC community.
It's overwhelming to see them come up and, the governor, Kay Ivey, thank you for approving the reward.
Tonight, blue ribbons dot mailboxes around Anaya's hometown in Alabama as nearly a dozen agencies, from local police to the FBI, work to bring her home.
That's our main goal. We have to find Anaya. We want her back. We want her back.
Well, Jose, the chief tells me that police here in Auburn are investigating a number of possibilities, including that Anaya possibly met up with somebody that she met online.
And then, a massive breakthrough. An eyewitness stepped forward. This person told investigators that they had seen a male inside the gas station who appeared to be forcing Anaya into her own Honda out in the parking lot before peeling out of there. And get this, the witness later admitted they didn't call for help right away because the woman they were with literally told them to stay out of it and not get involved. Talk about a heartbreaking moment where doing the right thing could have changed everything. Thanks to that tip, though, the police were able to hone in on a solid person of interest. A man matching that exact same description had been caught on the Chevron security cameras. He was described as a black male in his late 20s or early 30s, weighing around 200 pounds and standing between 5'8" and 5'10". He was wearing dark pants, dark shoes, and a distinctive camouflage Vans hoodie. Investigators also learned he had been driving a silver or gray early 2000s Lincoln Town car. Crucially, this man hadn't arrived at the Chevron with Anaya. Surveillance showed him buying some alcohol while repeatedly glancing over in her direction. It was blindingly obvious they didn't know each other at all. After they left the Chevron in Anaya's SUV, the vehicle made a brief stop at another nearby gas station, where the man went inside to buy a cigar. From there, her car completely fell off the grid, failing to trigger any license plate recognition systems for a full hour until it was finally spotted rolling into Montgomery. It didn't take long for the Auburn Police Department to connect the dots, identify the man, and lock him in as their prime suspect. Turns out he was incredibly well known to law enforcement and had been staying at a motel just a few miles away from Anaya's apartment. The mystery Eric was actually 29-year-old Ibrahim Yazid, a man with a terrifyingly long and violent criminal history spanning over a decade. Back in 2012, he had tried to kill 2 police officers, and in 2017, he was busted for aggravated battery on a law enforcement officer. But it gets even worse. In January 2019, he had brutally robbed and beaten 2 men at a Montgomery hotel, one of whom was a 77-year-old man who was knocked unconscious and nearly lost his life. For that incident alone, Yazid had been slapped with charges of kidnapping, attempted murder, and robbery. But in a tragic twist of systemic failure, he was actually allowed to walk free after posting bail. Now, with Anaya's disappearance officially being treated as a kidnapping, a fresh, urgent warrant was put out for his arrest.
We begin tonight with breaking news in the search for 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard.
The 19-year-old Alabama college student missing now for more than 2 weeks.
He should be considered dangerous and would be potentially armed.
There's currently a manhunt going on right now to track him down. Police tell us there's a warrant out for the arrest of 30-year-old Ibrahim Yazid of Montgomery. The charge, first-degree kidnapping. According to investigators, Yazid was at the same convenience store where Anaya Blanchard was last seen on October 23rd. These are surveillance videos from a Chevron on South College Street in Auburn. Police shared that with us yesterday. They tell us they believe Ibrahim Yazid took Anaya against her will. You may recall her car was found at a Montgomery apartment complex on October 25th. That is 2 days after Anaya was last seen. There was damage on the front right passenger side of the car. Police say evidence inside Anaya's vehicle gave them reason to believe that Anaya may have been a victim of foul play.
Yazid is currently out on bond for charges of kidnapping and attempted murder from a previous case in another jurisdiction.
Again, police are still looking for this man. Crime Stoppers is offering a $105,000 reward for information leading to his arrest and conviction. Anyone who sees him is asked to call 911.
U.S. Marshals located him in Escambia County, Florida. He was hiding out in the woods, and he did not go down without a fight.
Breaking news, an arrest has just been made in the disappearance of Alabama teen Anaya Blanchard.
He was extradited and officially charged with first-degree kidnapping. But even with the charges hanging over his head, he refused to talk, and Anaya was still completely missing. When Ibrahim Yazid was brought into the courtroom for his hearing, he actually sat there staring right at Walt and Angela. Walt later shared that the guy looked so unbelievably smug, it took every single ounce of strength in his body not to leap over the courtroom barrier and go after him. Honestly, I cannot even blame Walt for feeling that way. Can you imagine the absolute pure rage of sitting across from the person who holds the answers to your daughter's whereabouts, only for them to look at you with a smirk? It is just sickening.
What I say to him, I don't even know if I can say it on national television, to be honest. But if he's listening, if he's somehow watching this, please tell the authorities where my daughter is. Please.
We're still looking for Anaya, and that's what we want, is to find her. We need help finding her because we don't know. We have no information about where she is, and that's the most important thing to us right now, is getting her home.
A Lee County judge ordered Ibrahim to be held without bond and also forced him to submit to a DNA test. But while they were waiting on those DNA results, the plot thickened, and another person was taken into custody. 5-year-old Antwain Fisher was arrested and slapped with a first-degree kidnapping charge. Allegedly, he provided transportation for Ibrahim and even helped him dispose of evidence. And get this, he also had a massive rap sheet and had actually pleaded guilty to felony murder back in 2007. But honestly, the legal system here blows my mind. He got a split sentence and ended up serving just 3 years behind bars, with the other 17 years suspended. Like, how does someone involved in a literal murder get back out on the streets that fast? It's absolutely infuriating, and unfortunately, it left him free to play a role in this nightmare.
This morning, it has been more than 3 weeks since Homewood native Anaya Blanchard was reported missing from the Auburn area. Even with the suspect now in custody, her family has never given up hope that she would be brought home safely. And joining me now live in Studio 42 is Anaya's father, Elijah Blanchard, and his wife, her stepmother. Thank you so much for being here this morning. One of the most recent developments was the volunteer group Texas Equus Search calling off their search. Talk to us about your reaction to hearing that that portion of the search would be called off.
We kind of was figuring that because I don't think they had a specific area that they wanted to search in. So that's what, once that pulled out, but we have full confidence that the Auburn Police Department is going to do their efforts to make sure everything goes good.
Yesterday afternoon on Dr. Phil, Anaya's mother and stepfather said they do not believe that this was random, that they believe this may have been premeditated. How do you all feel about that? Do you agree?
Do you want me to? Our contention is that this was something random. Basically, by seeing the photos from the car being damaged, we initially start coming up with different scenarios as far as what could have possibly happened. And like I said, again, it's random, and we initially stated that we thought that it was a carjacking, and so that has always been our position.
Chief Register and his team are very good. They call me every day, or they send random texts, let me know, what's going on with the case. They've been really good with communicating with us. I have no problem with what they're doing. They're strictly professional, but they don't want to give us anything that's going to be damaged or anything like that. But they are communicating with us daily.
All right, Mr. and Mrs. Blanchard, we thank you so much for coming in again this morning. We want you to know our thoughts and prayers remain with your family and with Anaya as the search continues. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And before we go to break, we do want to show you the picture of Anaya Blanchard once again. If you've seen her or have any information about her whereabouts, call the Auburn Police Department tip line. You see that number there on your screen. It's 246-1391, 334-246-1391, and we'll be right back.
The police were closing in, but deep down, they knew the chances of bringing Anaya back alive were incredibly slim. And then, a massive breakthrough happened. Antwain finally agreed to cooperate with the authorities and told them exactly where to look. A few days later, on November 25th, just over a month after she first vanished, human remains were discovered in a wooded area behind a church in Macon County. Clothing was found scattered around the site, and a single boot was lying nearby. The district attorney, Brandon Hughes, took a photo of that boot and asked Angela and Walt to come down to the station. The second Walt laid eyes on the picture, he completely lost it, walked out of the room, and started screaming and punching the wall. He recognized those boots instantly. He had personally bought them for Anaya during a trip to New York. Honestly, just trying to picture that moment is absolutely devastating. DA Brandon Hughes had seen and dealt with a lot of heavy stuff throughout his career, but even years later, recounting the sheer agony Walt went through that day brought him to actual tears. It's the kind of heartbreak that just shatters you completely.
And a lot of developments happening today. As a matter of fact, Auburn police say investigators received information about the possible location of a body during their ongoing investigation into Blanche's disappearance. This is the area where the remains were discovered Monday morning, a rural area several feet into the woodline. The Lee County District Attorney says there is good reason to believe the remains are Blanchard's. 2 suspects have been charged with kidnapping her. Well, today there is new information, but not what anyone wanted to hear. Yazid and Fisher are being held now in the Lee County Jail. They are being held without bond.
The remains were officially confirmed to be Anaya, and a medical examiner determined that she had been shot in the head. The scene was so incredibly devastating that Angela said authorities wouldn't even let the family see her body, knowing the trauma would just be too much for them to bear. Like, can you even begin to comprehend the absolute cruelty of that? To have your child stolen from you, and you can't even hold her or say a proper goodbye because of what a monster did to her? It is genuinely sickening. Yet, showing an unbelievable amount of strength while investigators were still processing the scene, Angela stood up and spoke at a local vigil.
First, I want to address the parents. Parents, you never think that something like this is going to happen to your child. You prepare them, you think you've prepared them enough. I thought I did. I talked to Anaya about it every day on the phone. Hey, Anaya, make sure you're not, going anywhere by yourself at night. Make sure you're not doing, yeah, Mom, I know, I'm good, Mom, I got this. Trusted her with all my heart. But nothing you do can prepare you for some evil that is out there, y'all. Please. So I'm begging parents, put just a little bit more, teach your kids a little bit more. Right now I feel guilty, maybe even nothing I could have done, but I should have prepared her just a little bit better for things she might have came into contact with, the whole community. It's always been good, but now seeing the support that we have for what's happened to her, this would make, she's smiling right now in heaven. I can tell you that right now. She's not smiling, no. Anaya is laughing, and she's laughing at y'all. I can tell you right now, she's laughing at y'all. But this is making her heart smile. It's making my heart smile because we all know how special of a girl that Anaya was. She put everybody before her. She wanted everybody to have fun and laugh, and it was always, if y'all were having a good time, she was going to make sure you were having a good time because life was good for her, and she was a happy, happy, happy girl, and that's just the bottom line. Like,
a third suspect was then taken into custody. 3-year-old David Johnson Jr. was slapped with charges for hindering prosecution after admitting he knew his son had driven Ibrahim out of state while a warrant was actively out for his arrest. Meanwhile, the forensics team was working the car, and the DNA results came back with some wild details. Tests showed a mixture of 2 people's DNA on the steering wheel, and Anaya's was one of them. A vape cartridge left in the cup holder showed the exact same mix. The driver's headrest and the gear shift also carried DNA from at least 2 individuals, but the secondary male profile was unfortunately too faint to properly compare. Honestly, it is so frustrating to hear that, but it's not unusual in these cases. One investigator even noted a strong smell of hand sanitizer on the door handle when the vehicle was first recovered, meaning the scene had likely been scrubbed down to destroy evidence. But prosecutors knew they still had a rock-solid case. In early December, Ibrahim's charges were officially upgraded from first-degree kidnapping to 2 counts of capital murder specifically: murder during the commission of a kidnapping and murder during a felony. Despite the other 2 accomplices being locked up, detectives made it crystal clear that Ibrahim was the sole individual responsible for taking Anaya Blanchard, and he alone was responsible for her life being cut short. He pleaded not guilty, and the DA wasted no time announcing they would absolutely be seeking the death penalty. Like, the sheer audacity of this guy is infuriating. Every single time he stepped foot in that courtroom, he was smirking, laughing, and trying to stare people down. At one point, he even snapped directly at the judge, claiming they had absolutely nothing on him, while his own lawyer desperately tried to shut him up. It takes a truly sick individual to show that much disrespect to a grieving family.
I'm innocent. No concrete evidence.
To say he didn't care at all is a massive understatement. But before the year even wrapped up, the case took a frustrating turn. All charges against Antwain Fisher were completely dropped. The state determined that his involvement didn't quite meet the legal threshold for accomplice liability. So, based on those jurisdictional grounds, his lawyers moved for a dismissal and a judge granted it. However, Antwain didn't walk away without talking first. He gave investigators the chilling details they needed to lock down Ibrahim's timeline. He explained that Ibrahim had originally rolled up to his house driving a black Honda. From there, they drove over to the apartment complex parking lot where Anaya's abandoned car was later discovered. Ibrahim left the Honda behind, hopped into Antwain's truck, and told him to drive. They ended up at that secluded church in Macon County, where Antwain watched Ibrahim drag something wrapped heavily in a comforter out of the back. As he did, Antwain caught sight of 2 legs. Once Ibrahim got back into the truck, he casually admitted to the whole thing, claiming he shot a girl because she went for his gun. Ultimately, the investigation concluded that Antwain's actions made him an accessory after the fact, rather than an active participant in the abduction itself. Around the same time, the charges against the 3rd suspect, David Johnson Jr., were dropped as well. Preliminary hearings for Ibrahim were locked in for April 2020, but as we all know, the world completely changed that spring, and the pandemic lockdowns threw a massive wrench into the justice system. Everything came to a grinding halt, but even while sitting behind bars awaiting trial, Ibrahim's violent streak didn't slow down for a second. He ended up facing fresh charges just for biting a corrections officer while in jail, and the deeper detectives dug into his past, the worse it got. He was officially tied to a cold case from 2018 involving the murder of a man named Stephen Hamby. Stephen had been shot multiple times in a wooded area and tragically succumbed to his injuries at the hospital. If that wasn't enough, Ibrahim was also hit with attempted murder charges for shooting a woman in the face during that exact same 2018 incident. It became blindingly obvious to everyone involved that they weren't just dealing with a kidnapper, they were dealing with a serial monster who should have never been allowed on the streets in the first place.
Jury selection will continue tomorrow morning in the trial of Ibrahim Yazid. Of the 450 jurors summoned for the case, 105 appeared in court. Some of them will return tomorrow alongside others scheduled to be reviewed. The selection process could take up to a week. Homewood City Hall lit up in blue tonight in honor of Anaya and her family. During the trial, Anaya went to Homewood High. The city says this will go on for the next 10 nights as a symbol of remembrance, support, and unity.
In March 2026, nearly 6.5 years after this nightmare first began, Ibrahim Yazid finally stood trial, still stubbornly maintaining his not guilty plea. Right out of the gate, the defense team tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case, arguing that no direct physical evidence, neither DNA nor fingerprints, actually tied Yazid to the interior of the vehicle. They boldly claimed the state had nothing but speculation. We have theories that he kidnapped her. We have theories that he robbed her. We have theories that he killed her. That's all we've got," his lawyer stated to the courtroom. However, a forensic expert quickly countered this, reminding the jury that it's incredibly common for items to yield no matching DNA, and that a lack of physical evidence certainly didn't mean he was never in that car with her. Instead, the state's case relied heavily on a mountain of circumstantial evidence: surveillance footage, eyewitness testimonies, and cell phone records. And remember those initial rumors about Anaya potentially meeting a guy named Eric on a dating app? Investigators officially put that to rest, confirming there was zero evidence to back it up. Everything pointed to this being a completely random, opportunistic attack. The prosecution argued that Yazid simply saw a young woman alone at a gas station late at night and targeted her on the spot. They also suggested that he might have been the one who sent those confusing text messages from her phone to buy himself time and mislead anyone looking for her. When it came to proving the kidnapping charge, prosecutors made a very strategic move in how they presented the timeline. While an eyewitness at the gas station did report seeing Anaya being forced into her car, there was a brief, unrecorded gap in the gas station's security footage. The cameras only captured Yazid exiting the store and getting into the passenger side of Anaya's vehicle. Because of that missing footage, prosecutors couldn't definitively prove what words were exchanged or exactly what happened the second he slid into the seat. Anticipating that the defense would try to exploit this by arguing she might have let him into the car willingly, which would technically challenge the legal definition of an abduction, the state shut that down fast. They argued that even if his initial entry into the vehicle had been consensual, the sheer volume of Anaya's blood soaked into the passenger seat and the spent bullet casing found in the door proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was trapped and fearing for her life. At some point inside that car, a violent, terrifying struggle took place as Anaya fought like hell to survive. Framing the charge this way ensured the kidnapping count remained bulletproof, no matter what spin the defense tried to put on it. In the final harrowing moments of her life, prosecutors speculated that Anaya may have desperately reached for Yazid's gun in a brave attempt to fight him off before he pulled the trigger, a theory that tragically matched exactly what Ibrahim had bragged about to Aunt Twain. Fisher on the night of the murder.
Capital murder trial for Ibrahim Yazid entering the final stages as the state and defense rest their cases in Lee County late today.
Jason, today we heard from a forensic anthropologist and from the chief medical examiner in Alabama. They were both on site in Macon County where Anaya Blanchard's remains were discovered. Now, those remains were very scattered, and they worked together to evaluate 1,700 square meters of woods. The forensic anthropologist, alongside her team, worked to recover several different bones, including skull fragments, vertebrae, ribs, soft tissue, and teeth. While on the stand, she said based on the bone fusion, bone length, and shape and size of the skull, she was able to determine the remains belonged to an African-American woman in her late teens, saying they were consistent to Anaya Blanchard.
The prosecution called more than 40 witnesses, but the defense rested without calling a single witness. And 6 days after it started, it was all over.
Yesterday, he was facing 2 counts of capital murder, but today the jury decided to go with lesser charges.
In a shocking turn of events, the jury chose not to convict Ibrahim on the capital murder charges. Instead, they opted for the lesser offenses of felony murder, which was tied directly to the kidnapping and intentional murder tied to the robbery of her car and phone. Because of this specific verdict, the absolute worst-case scenario happened for the prosecution. The death penalty was completely taken off the table. Not only that, but he could no longer face life without the possibility of parole for these specific charges. It was a devastating blow to everyone who had fought so hard for maximum justice, leaving an agonizing sense of frustration over how a man who committed such a brutal, calculated crime could escape the ultimate punishment.
Breaking news in a case we've been following for years. Ibrahim Yazid was just sentenced for the murder of Homewood native Anaya Blanchard.
Just last month, in May 2026, the judge handed down the final sentence, life in prison. Ibrahim was given 2 concurrent life sentences, which was the absolute maximum punishment allowed under the law for those specific convictions. Now, while his sentence technically includes the possibility of parole, when he will actually become eligible depends entirely on how the Department of Corrections structures his time. And let's be real, just because he can apply for parole down the road doesn't mean he'll ever get it. For a criminal this notoriously violent, a board actually letting him out is highly unlikely. Following the sentencing, the district attorney released a statement saying, "Today, justice has been served. I am gratified that the court imposed the maximum allowable sentence for the senseless and brutal murder of Anaya Blanchard life in prison. It is the sentence that the weight of this crime demanded, and one that Anaya's family has long deserved. This case has absolutely shaken our community to its core. It is my intention that the response to this horrific crime will be a warning to anyone who believes they want to come to Lee County and engage in violent criminal behavior. You will be dealt with, and the consequences will be severe." For Anaya's family, the day brought a heavy sense of closure. Her mother, Angela, shared a powerful perspective, saying, "My daughter fought a very violent criminal. She fought hard, and she got him off the streets so he could never hurt anybody again, and that feels good." Anaya's father, Elijah Sr., also spoke out, noting that his daughter's name speaks now, and that her legacy was powerful enough to secure a conviction. He added that he was happy with the outcome and ready for whatever happens going forward, knowing Ibrahim will be behind bars for the rest of his life. For the family, it was crucial to look him in the eyes in that courtroom and let him know that he didn't win. They described him as a completely lethal, gutless, and ruthless individual who lacks even a shred of a conscience, something his horrific track record had already proven. But as the trial wrapped up, a massive, glaring question still hung over the entire community. Ibrahim Yazid was actively out on bond for severe charges, including kidnapping, attempted murder, and robbery when he targeted and killed Anaya. It left everyone asking, how was a monster like this allowed on the streets in the first place, and how did the system let him slip through the cracks?
It blows my mind how a person like that is still able to walk around and be amongst people. And, there are a lot of things we need answers.
These burning questions ultimately led to the passing of Anaya's Law by the Alabama legislature, which was overwhelmingly approved by Alabama voters as a statewide constitutional amendment in November 2022. Before this change, a massive loophole existed. The Alabama Constitution guaranteed the right to bail for all defendants unless they were facing capital murder charges. Because Ibrahim Yazid's previous violent crimes were not technically capital offenses, judges were legally forced to grant him bond and release him. Anaya's Law completely changed the game, expanding the list of offenses for which a judge can deny bail altogether. It added 12 serious violent crimes to the list, including murder, attempted murder, first-degree kidnapping, rape, robbery, domestic violence, and aggravated child abuse. It was a monumental victory for public safety. Mayor Jimmy Gardner summed it up perfectly, stating, "Violent offenders should not be given the opportunity to commit violent crimes again. I think everybody should have an opportunity to get a bond. But yet, when you're a violent offender and you find yourself going out a second time, there is no reason for us to allow you to have that opportunity because you've already proven yourself not to be a good citizen." Beyond changing the law, Anaya's family wanted to ensure her legacy kept protecting others. They started the nonprofit organization Anaya's Heart to provide vital safety, education, and situational awareness to young people, focusing on advocacy to prevent future tragedies. Today, Anaya is also remembered through a scholarship in her name and a memorial bench placed in one of her absolute favorite parks. This case remains a chilling, heartbreaking reminder of just how quickly a life can be stolen. Anaya Blanchard was simply doing what millions of us do every single day, pulling into a well-lit, busy gas station to pick up a drink. She could have never known that a fatal flaw in the legal system would ultimately cost her her life. Behind the headlines, the private grief of her family continues. Her brother, Elijah Jr., has mostly kept to himself since his sister's passing. He now cares for her beloved dog, Blue, focusing on the simple things in life to find peace. Her younger brother used to fall asleep holding her picture every single night. Her younger sister, who was just 6 years old at the time, struggled to process the permanence of the loss, constantly asking where Anaya was. Walt recalled a heartbreaking day when he was called into her school because she just couldn't stop crying, overwhelmed by how much she missed her big sister. Her mother, Angela, shared a deeply personal piece of her heart, saying, "I had Anaya on my birthday, June 22nd. That was just going to be something so special in life for she and I to share. Ordinary moments are painful because Anaya should be here. Her siblings must live the rest of their lives without her. I must live the rest of my life without her. There is no sentence that can restore what was taken from us." Baytown, Texas. Here we find 7-year-old Crystal McDowell, an ambitious realtor and a busy mother of 2. To look at her back then, you'd think she had it all figured out, right? But honestly, when you look into her early life, it is just heartbreaking. Crystal's childhood was an absolute nightmare, and it's a miracle she even survived it. She was born into a highly unstable environment, facing unimaginable hardships from the very day she entered this world. Can you even imagine the kind of environment she grew up in? By the time she was just 11 years old, she suffered the devastating loss of both of her parents within just 6 months of each other, leaving her completely vulnerable, literally orphaned at 11. And as if that wasn't already a devastating hand to be dealt, the trauma didn't stop there. Just 2 years later, when she was only 13, Crystal was abducted by a dangerous predator. This monster kept her locked away in a chicken coop, subjecting her to horrific, sustained abuse. It's the kind of stuff that gives you chills just thinking about it. But Crystal was an absolute fighter. Against all odds, she managed to escape that living hell and eventually moved in with relatives. Honestly, nobody would have blamed her if she completely went off the rails after enduring that much pain. Like, how does a teenager even process that level of trauma? Most people would break, but Crystal? She was built different. She was fiercely determined to flip the script and build a real life for herself. Eventually, she landed a job as a flight attendant, which is where she crossed paths with Steve McDowell, a shipping manager. They hit it off and got married shortly after. According to Steve's friends, he was basically like a big kid, just a lighthearted, fun-loving guy who could always make her laugh. And honestly, after everything she had been through, can you really blame her for wanting to be with someone who brought pure joy and laughter into her world? She deserved that peace.
What are you doing today?
About to jump out of a perfectly good airplane.
Out of a plane. Whose idea was this?
Steve.
Steve, your idea? How high are we right now? What does that say?
6,000 feet.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Hey, high five. Hey, look, your husband lived too. What a bonus.
But as perfect as things looked on Instagram and Facebook, behind closed doors, it was a totally different story. Friends knew their marriage was on thin ice. While she was still working as a flight attendant, Crystal was actually cheating on Steve with both men and women. And I mean, obviously, that is going to completely wreck the trust in any relationship. The drama was nonstop. Crystal packed her bags and left him multiple times. And get this, she even filed for divorce just a few months into their very first year of marriage. It was incredibly toxic from the jump. But then, the kids came along. Their son Madden and daughter Maui. And honestly, we see this happen all the time, right? Crystal decided to tough it out and stay together just for the sake of the kids. She wanted to give them the stable family she never had. Eventually, the 7-year-old traded her flight attendant wings for a career in real estate right there in Baytown, Texas. But as the kids grew up and her new business really started blowing up, those old buried marriage problems came screaming back to the surface. You can only patch up a broken foundation for so long. Finally, in June of 2017, after 10 years of marriage, Crystal finalized her divorce from Steve, and they agreed to co-parent with joint custody. But here is where things get a little tricky. They actually made the call to keep living under the same roof until they were ready to sell the house. I know, It sounds like a recipe for disaster, but logistically, it kind of made sense at the time because Crystal was busy renovating her own townhouse. During all this transition, Crystal started low-key dating a local jeweler named Paul Hargrave, who was also recently divorced. She was keeping the new romance super close to her chest and didn't really blast it to the world, but her close friends could see the change. They said they hadn't seen her this happy in literally ages. Like, oh my God, she finally had this incredible new lease on life. Her real estate career was thriving, her kids were doing amazing, and it truly felt like she was finally getting her happy ending. Which brings us to the 25th of August 2017, at 7:09 a.m. Crystal and Paul had gone out on a date the night before, and she had stayed over at his place. That morning, Paul jumped in the shower while Crystal started getting her stuff together to head out. Security cameras both inside and outside of Paul's house catch the whole thing. They show Crystal grabbing her things, completely normal, and walking out to her black Mercedes. Her plan for the day was to drive over, pick up the kids from Steve, and then head out to a couple of work meetings. As she pulled away, she pulled out her phone and sent Paul a text, saying, "No traffic today, smiley face. I may end up taking them out if they want to go somewhere. Have an amazing day. You are so sweet." He replied, "I love you, and I'll always support you." At 1 p.m., Paul sent her a text saying, "Hey, just checking on you. Please let me know if you need anything at all. Miss you." She never replied. Paul figured, okay, maybe she just got swept up in a crazy day with the kids, or maybe one of her real estate meetings was running way longer than expected. We've all been there, right? But as the hours ticked by, the silence became deafening. Later that afternoon, Crystal was supposed to meet up with her family to watch the massive, highly anticipated Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor fight on TV. Everyone was hyped for it, but Crystal never showed up. By this point, Paul's stomach was completely turning. He sent her another text, basically begging for a sign of life. "I'm so worried about you. I hope you're okay." Still, absolute radio silence. It's like she just vanished into thin air. When she didn't show up at her family's house either, the alarm bells officially went off. Her Uncle Jeff, who was literally like a father to her and had raised her ever since she was a little girl, knew in his gut that something was terribly wrong. Crystal would never just ghost her family like this. Realizing they couldn't wait a second longer, Jeff picked up the phone and made the terrifying call to the police.
Chambers County Sheriff's Office.
My niece, no one can get a hold of her, no one has heard from her, and I'm really concerned.
However, just as the police were beginning to piece together the timeline of Crystal's disappearance, something absolutely massive hit the region, completely shifting everyone's attention and draining crucial resources. For the past couple of days, the atmosphere in southern Texas had been pure chaos. Grocery store shelves were completely wiped clean, as terrified locals rushed to bulk buy food, water, and emergency supplies. Everyone knew a storm was coming, but nobody was truly prepared for the scale of it. This wasn't just your average, everyday bout of bad weather. The news suddenly dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the entire state. This storm had rapidly intensified into a monstrous Category 4 hurricane. Honestly, my heart just sinks thinking about the timing of this. Like, are you kidding me? As if a mother going missing isn't already a worst-case scenario, now a literal natural disaster is rolling in to completely derail the search. Can you even fathom the pure panic her family must have been feeling right then? They are desperately trying to find Crystal, while the rest of the world is literally boarding up their windows and fleeing for their lives.
This is an ABC News special report. Hurricane Harvey.
We are coming on the air for breaking news. Hurricane Harvey barreling into the Texas coastline as a Category 4 storm with 130-mile-an-hour winds. It's the first Category 4 storm to hit the U.S. in over a decade, threatening record rain totals of up to 35 inches throughout much of Texas that could render some areas uninhabitable for months. More than 150,000 people at this hour plunged into darkness, the president declaring a federal disaster disaster for the state, and we are already hearing reports of significant damage, of collapsed buildings, of people perhaps trapped under the rubble.
When I opened the door, more water rushed in, and all of my stuff flew out, and it just kept coming in. All I could grab was my wallet and my phone. That's all I knew to grab.
What started out as a routine tropical wave rolling off the coast of Africa rapidly mutated into a monster, Hurricane Harvey. And at around 10 p.m., on that very same day, August 25th, Harvey slammed directly into the Texas coast. Honestly, it is terrifying how fast it happened. Nobody truly understood the absolute nightmare headed their way until just hours before landfall. The destruction left in its wake was catastrophic, completely rewriting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. We are talking about insane winds topping 130 miles per hour. The unprecedented flooding literally displaced more than 30,000 people from their homes. On top of that, it spun out a staggering 57 tornadoes that ripped across 6 different states, ultimately claiming more than 100 lives in the U.S. alone. To put it into perspective, Hurricane Harvey went down in history as the deadliest hurricane to strike Texas since all the way back in 1919, and the deadliest in the entire country since Hurricane Sandy in 2012. So, just imagine being Crystal's family in the middle of this apocalypse. The pure terror they were feeling for her safety immediately shot up tenfold. But here is the thing that gives me absolute chills deep down in their guts. They knew. They just knew that the storm wasn't the reason she was gone. Think about it. She disappeared hours before the hurricane even made landfall, when the roads were still completely clear. No matter how insane the weather was getting outside, her loved ones were convinced that a far more sinister human threat had taken Crystal.
It has been days since the mysterious disappearance of a Houston area realtor. Crystal McDowell was last heard from August 25th, shortly before Harvey hit Houston.
3 days into the investigation, right in the absolute thick of the storm's aftermath, Crystal's cousin Jade gets a random text. And honestly, this message completely turned the case on its head. Someone texted her saying they had spotted Crystal's black Mercedes parked over at a local Motel 6. They even attached a photo as proof. And oh my God, looking at that picture must have been completely gut-wrenching. Because of the insane flooding from Harvey, the car was almost entirely submerged. You could literally just see her license plate barely bobbing right above the murky water. I mean, just pause and think about that for a second. If you're the police or the family, your mind immediately goes into overdrive. Is Crystal inside that car? Did she try to drive through the storm and get trapped in the rising waters? Or did someone deliberately dump her vehicle at a sketchy motel to make it look like a tragic accident? The stakes just became unimaginably high, and the clock was ticking.
See this black car right here? This Mercedes? The cops were here busting in doors to find out where this lady is.
Crystal McDowell's car was found submerged in a Motel 6 parking lot about 13 miles from her home. Friends and family don't believe her absence is flood-related.
Despite the incredibly dangerous, life-threatening conditions, investigators refused to back down. They hopped into rescue gear and managed to push through the floodwaters to reach that Motel 6. And what they found inside that submerged Mercedes changed everything. The car was parked totally haphazardly, just thrown into a spot. But get this, the doors were completely unlocked, and the keys were sitting right there in the center console. I mean, wow. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what was going on here. Whoever ditched that car did it on purpose, completely hoping that some random person would come along, steal it, and make the whole thing vanish. But investigators weren't buying it for a second. They knew Crystal would never be that reckless with her prized car. Sheriff Brian Hawthorne didn't mince words either, straight up stating, "We don't believe she parked it there. We believe that whoever parked it there had hoped somebody would take it." Exactly. It was a total setup. So, using an airboat, the team carefully towed the Mercedes out of the deep floodwaters and rushed it straight to forensics. At this point, it was a literal race against time. Everyone was just holding their breath, desperately praying that the toxic floodwater hadn't completely destroyed the DNA, fingerprints, or whatever crucial evidence that monster left behind.
Now, a lot of people are wondering if the bizarre timing of her disappearance was the perfect storm to cover up a crime.
This morning, the desperate search for a Houston real estate agent and mother of two, Crystal McDowell, posting on Facebook, "Stay safe out there," the night before she was last seen. According to her boyfriend, Paul Hargraves, this home security video shows her the next morning heading out of his house and getting into her car on her way to pick up her kids from her ex-husband, who lives about 20 minutes away.
She did send me some text messages, basically that the roads were clear of what to do in preparation of the storm.
Hargraves showed us his last text message exchange with McDowell. Her last text message to Hargraves was, "And you are so sweet."
She wouldn't just get up and leave her kids. She wouldn't do that. So I think something's horribly wrong.
I think that there was probably some animosity between boyfriends and husbands, and the husband probably might think the boyfriend had something to do with it, the boyfriend might think the husband had something to do with it.
As the investigation started ramping up, the police naturally needed to look at everyone closest to her. They wanted to sit down and talk to her new boyfriend, Paul, and her uncle, Jeff. Now, both of these men had already gone on the news, giving these incredibly emotional, tear-filled pleas to the media, begging for anyone with information to come forward. And honestly, watching stuff like that always breaks my heart because you can just feel the raw desperation of a family caught in a nightmare. But as a seasoned investigator, you can't just take tears at face value. You have to clear the inner circle first. That's just Criminology 101. So detectives had to dig deep into both of them, tracking their exact movements to see if their stories actually held up under scrutiny.
And our main objective is just to get Crystal back home.
I hope and pray that, she's okay and she's going to come back to us.
What do you think happened to her?
I'm not sure. But we're just trying to focus on finding her and assisting the police with whatever we can assist them with.
But as detectives started digging, Uncle Jeff's behavior quickly raised some eyebrows. He was actually accused of getting in the way of the official investigation. Instead of letting the police do their job, Jeff showed up at Crystal's townhouse with a group of family members and started going through all of her personal belongings. Now, look, from a legal standpoint, that is a massive red flag. It can easily be seen as tampering with a crime scene, and one detective straight up noted that Jeff had a real tendency to disrupt their work. But honestly, if we look at this objectively, can you really blame a desperate father figure? Jeff insisted he was just losing his mind, wanting answers, and was only trying to help find his niece. When someone you love vanishes into thin air, you aren't thinking about police protocol. You are just acting on pure, panicked instinct. Then there was Paul, the new boyfriend. He told detectives that he was in the shower the exact moment Crystal left that morning, which is why he didn't actually witness her walking out the door. And to be fair, his home security cameras backed up his story 100%. The footage showed Crystal leaving exactly when he said she did, proving he was telling the truth. But there was one glaring detail about this camera footage that completely rubbed investigators the wrong way. It actually took a few days for the tape to end up in the hands of the police. For reasons nobody could really explain, Paul chose to hand the security footage over to the media before giving it to the detectives. Like what? Why would you blast your private security footage on the news before handing it to the actual cops investigating your girlfriend's disappearance? It's definitely a bizarre move that makes you question his judgment. Still, as far as the police could tell, everything between the new couple had been absolutely amazing. In fact, just 2 days before she completely vanished, Crystal had hopped onto Facebook and posted a message saying, "I've never been happier in my whole life than I am right now. God is so good." And then, of course, we have to talk about her ex-husband, Steve. According to Steve, Crystal had sent him a text message right when she left Paul's house, which read, "On my way. Do you have water? Looks like I may stay here with the kids." It seems just like rain. Now, at the time, this text didn't raise any red flags because, as we know, The entire town was already frantically prepping for the incoming storm. But then, Steve showed detectives another text message, this one supposedly sent by Crystal to her Uncle Jeff. This second text claimed she was going to swing by, grab the kids, and immediately drive up to Dallas. Uncle Jeff did admit they had briefly talked about fleeing to Dallas to take shelter, but he told police she had never actually confirmed that plan with him. So, right off the bat, the timeline and her intentions are looking incredibly messy. But when detectives started asking around about Steve, the picture painted by those who knew him was absolutely chilling. Crystal's aunt mentioned that while Steve would technically do anything Crystal asked, he had become obsessively overbearing in a way that was just straight up unhealthy. Another close friend of Crystal didn't hold back at all, describing Steve as incredibly self-centered, manipulative, and someone who always had to have things his way, right now. They said he very much carried that toxic, terrifying attitude of, well, if I can't have her, no one can. Like, oh my God, hearing that gives me literal goosebumps. Can you imagine the constant, suffocating pressure she was under? As the years went on, Crystal felt completely trapped in that marriage. She was the main provider for the entire household, which was already a massive source of stress, while Steve would apparently just spend without a care in the world. And get this, Crystal had actually filed for divorce all the way back in 2008, but she ended up calling it off because Steve resorted to extreme emotional blackmail, threatening to harm himself if she left. Talk about ultimate emotional manipulation. Later, when they split up yet again, Crystal had to call 911, absolutely frantic, because Steve had vanished into thin air with the kids while continuing that same unstable behavior. So when Crystal demanded a final divorce in early 2017, Steve was completely distraught. Even his eldest daughter, from a previous relationship, Krista, backed this up. She said her dad was still desperately in love with Crystal, pointing out that he was still wearing his wedding ring well after she went missing. Krista had lived with them for a couple of years and admitted her dad had been in and out of her life, describing the couple's marriage as fraught and turbulent. She straight up said, both weren't perfect, and they both had their issues. I just think they were both toxic for each other, and they made each other crazy. But here is where things take a truly bizarre and sinister turn. After they split for good in 2017, Krista noticed her dad started acting really weird. He suddenly changed his social media profile pictures to the Grim Reaper and set his Facebook banner to a graphic that read, "In loving memory." I mean, hold on a second. Are you kidding me? Your wife goes missing, and your social media is already decked out in death imagery? How is that not a massive screaming red flag? What was he thinking? And the drama only escalates from there. Crystal had recently invited her new boyfriend, Paul, on an upcoming family cruise. Now, Steve was technically supposed to go on this cruise too, which sounds like the most awkward situation imaginable, right? So, Crystal wisely asked Steve to stay behind. But here is the kicker. Despite the fact that the ink was barely dry on their divorce papers, Steve was actually planning to propose to her again on that cruise. He was in total, complete denial that their marriage was over. Because of his reckless spending and the fact that they were legally done, Crystal finally decided to cut him off financially. Yet when the police interviewed him, detectives said Steve was incredibly cooperative, kind, and helpful. He clearly still cared about his ex, and kept insisting he'd do whatever it took to help. He was at the police station every single day, sitting there for hours at a time. Eventually, both Steve and Paul volunteered to take polygraph tests. Steve straight up failed his. Paul said he never got his official results, but the test came with a lot of aggressive shouting from detectives accusing him of lying about something. But look, as we all know, lie detector tests are completely inadmissible in court. So they didn't really give the investigation anything concrete to move forward with. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Crystal's family took matters into their own hands and hired a private investigator. Uncle Jeff personally put up a $10,000 reward for answers, and Paul threw in another $5,000 on top of that. By this point, the police officially declared that they were treating Crystal's case as foul play. Chambers County Sheriff Brian Hawthorne made it crystal clear to the public, stating, "We're chasing a lot of leads, but no, Hurricane Harvey is not the reason Crystal McDowell is missing. Paul completely agreed, telling the media she would never just get up and abandon her kids. She just wasn't that kind of mom. So something was horribly wrong. A former FBI agent weighing in on the case added, "There is no apparent reason why she would have disappeared. When you look at someone's background, have they been depressed? Have they talked about harming themselves? Have they talked about leaving? I haven't heard one thing that would suggest any of the above." Exactly! Crystal was on top of the world. Her career was booming. She was finally happy. She had zero reasons to run away. But between the absolute chaos and carnage caused by Hurricane Harvey and having 3 different men in her inner circle to untangle, the police hit a brick wall. The entire investigation ground to a sudden, frustrating halt.
We've got a handful of folks that need to be interviewed. What else do you guys see that's up on this board that we need to get done? Because this stuff's going to start drying up on us if we don't jump on it.
Paul is just soaking up all the attention.
Yeah, he is, and
he loves it.
And he's best buddies with Uncle Jeff too. That's what I don't understand. It's getting more and more interesting about Uncle Jeff, isn't it?
They had absolutely no idea where to look or what to do next. As the days bled into weeks, everyone was completely losing hope of ever finding her alive. When detectives ran checks on her digital footprint, it was just a total dead end. There was absolutely nothing new on her phone, and her bank cards showed zero activity. It's like her entire financial and digital life just froze the second she drove away from Paul's house. A completely defeated district attorney, Cheryl Leak, didn't sugarcoat the situation at all, straight up saying,
I know she's dead.
Steve, Jeff, and Paul had all been dragged into the interrogation room multiple times, and the tension between them was getting incredibly messy. Paul openly admitted to police that he was terrified Steve had something to do with her disappearance. Meanwhile, Uncle Jeff was pointing fingers right back, saying Paul completely creeped him out and he just didn't trust him. And Steve? He just played completely dumb, acting like he had absolutely no clue what could have happened. All he kept repeating was that Crystal was supposed to come grab the kids but never showed up. But as the floodwaters finally began to recede, officers were finally able to get back to that Motel 6, where her submerged Mercedes had been ditched. This time, they could actually access the CCTV cameras from the motel and the surrounding businesses, and oh my God, what they saw completely flipped the case wide open. The security footage showed Crystal's car being dropped off at exactly 6:37 a.m. on August 26th, the morning after she went missing. Now, the figure stepping out of the driver's seat definitely resembled her ex-husband Steve, but the quality just wasn't sharp enough to make a definitive call. But right next door to the motel was a gas station, and their cameras captured something much more damning. About 5 hours after the Mercedes was ditched, a car pulls into the gas station. A man gets out, walks over to the outdoor trash can, and shoves something deep inside, really forcing it all the way down to the bottom so it wouldn't be visible to anyone. And this time, the footage was crystal clear. Investigators could confidently say, without a shadow of a doubt, that this man was Steve McDowell. I mean, wow. If you have nothing to hide, why are you suspiciously jamming things into a gas station trash can? But it gets even creepier. Steve then paces around the lot for a bit, constantly looking over his shoulder, staring directly toward the motel. Detectives were absolutely certain he was checking to see if Crystal's Mercedes was still sitting there. See, it perfectly backed up their theory. Whoever dumped that car left it unlocked with the keys in the console, desperately hoping some opportunistic thief would steal it and make the evidence disappear. Honestly, if it wasn't for the historic rain and apocalyptic flooding keeping everyone indoors, that car probably would have been stolen. But here's the heartbreaking part. Because of Hurricane Harvey, that gas station trash can had completely flooded too. Whatever crucial piece of evidence Steve rammed down into that bin had floated away long before the police could get to it. But investigators didn't stop there. They remembered seeing a bicycle at Steve's house during his initial interview, and when they pushed him on his timeline, he claimed he had been at a local Walmart that morning. So detectives rushed over to Walmart to pull their tapes. Sure enough, they found footage of a man fitting Steve's exact description, with his hood pulled up tight, paying for a bike in cold, hard cash. And get this, Additional cameras in the area tracked that same man riding the bike through the pouring rain, heading right toward the drop-off scene at the motel. Like, are you kidding me? The pieces of the puzzle are literally falling into place right before our eyes. He drives her car to the motel, rides a cash-bought bike back, and then returns later to make sure the car is gone. It is so calculating. But legally, this was still very much circumstantial evidence, and the prosecutors needed more to lock him away. Steve completely denied it was him on that bike. And without a crystal clear, high-def shot of his face on the street cameras or a credit card trail to link him to the bike purchase, the police were forced to hit pause on that lead for the moment. By now, it had been 10 excruciating days since Crystal vanished. But finally, the storm cleared, the relentless rain stopped, and patches of dry land were finally starting to emerge from the floods. The search and rescue teams could finally deploy properly, and everyone knew that whatever secrets Hurricane Harvey had been hiding were about to come to light.
Angelica, I know they've been looking for her for weeks now. What can you tell us?
Well, we checked in with them. They say there's no movement on her bank account or her passport. The sheriff here says that the search area is in West Chambers County and in Baytown, rather. They say the thinking is that she's still in this area.
Do I think there's potential foul play involved in it? Yes, I do.
And with each passing day, Sheriff Hawthorne says that concern grows. Crystal McDowell was last heard from on Friday, August 25th, through a text message to her uncle.
Stating that about a billboard her boyfriend had put up for her, and that was it. That was the last time I heard from her.
He immediately reached out for help, and then Hurricane Harvey slammed into the area. Right now, they're combing through surveillance videos from businesses and personal surveillance videos from homes. Loved ones say McDowell has been living in the Legends Bay subdivision with her ex-husband and 2 small children, but had moved on with a new boyfriend.
She was on top of the world. She was the happy. She had said herself she was the happiest she had ever been in her life.
And because of that, they don't believe she would have left on her own. And the sheriff says they're looking at several persons of interest, and he says he's confident that answers could be coming soon. Live in Chambers County, I'm Angelica Alvarez for 13 Eyewitness News.
Paul and Uncle Jeff were both right there on the front lines, doing whatever they could to help the search teams. But notice who was completely missing from the grid? Their number one person of interest, Steve. He was nowhere to be found. Realizing they needed to shake things up, the district attorney made a massive, high-stakes tactical move. She officially ordered Madden and Maui to be removed from Steve's custody and placed them safely with Crystal's aunt, Cindy. See, investigators knew Steve was already starting to crack under the pressure. Every single day, he had been walking into that police station, and every day he looked visibly worse, more gaunt, completely exhausted, just totally drained. The DA realized that taking his kids away might just be the absolute final straw. It was the ultimate psychological play to break his silence. And, oh my God, it worked perfectly. When Steve walked back into the station and they dropped the bombshell that his children had been taken and given to Cindy, he literally went faint and wobbly on his feet. The reality of the situation finally hit him like a freight train. He told detectives he needed to go home, but promised he would return first thing in the morning, and this time, he was finally going to tell them the truth. The second he got home, the panic must have been unreal. Steve sent a desperate text to his oldest daughter, Krista, begging her to come over because he didn't think he would be seeing her for a while. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Krista drove over to his house, arriving around 3 a.m. She sat him down, looked him dead in the eye, and asked him outright if he had anything to do with Crystal's disappearance. At first, he kept up the act, repeatedly denying it. But after a few hours of pacing and agonizing, he finally broke. He turned to Krista and whispered, "They told me if I take them to where her body is, they'll lessen my punishment." Can you even imagine being in Krista's shoes right then, hearing your own father say that? She desperately tried to rationalize it, turning to him and saying, "Well, you don't know where the body is." But Steve just looked at her and said, "What if it's true?" And right then, the mask completely slipped. He looked away and just burst into tears. Knowing the walls were closing in, Steve decided to negotiate. He made the state an offer. He would confess to everything that happened and personally lead the police straight to Crystal's body, but on 2 strict conditions. First, he wanted to see his kids one last time. Second, the death penalty had to be completely taken off the table. Realizing this was their only shot at finally bringing Crystal home and giving her family closure, the prosecutors agreed to the deal.
My understanding from our communication was that you were kind of ready to be honest about some things.
I love her. I would do anything in my life for her.
Steve confessed that he had had a row with Crystal that morning. She had told him she didn't love him anymore and he couldn't take it. He said he grabbed her from behind and attacked her in a fit of rage, but said it wasn't premeditated.
Yeah, when she told you she didn't want to be on board?
Yeah.
When she told you she didn't want to be with you, have anything to do with you?
Easter. But what are you over this?
Okay, like a chokehold or something? Did she say anything when that was going on, or did you fight, or what happened?
Just was scaring her.
How did you eventually know that she was no longer alive?
He then covered her face with a bag and wrapped her in a blanket, placing her in the trunk of her car.
And what'd you do after that?
I covered her face with a bag.
And then you put her in the car?
I got her, put her in the trash bags, and put her in the car.
He confessed to everything. After taking her life, he drove her body out to a remote area, dumped her, and then ditched her Mercedes at the motel, completely banking on some random thief stealing it to erase the evidence. When detectives pushed him on why he did it, he tried to play the victim card, crying, "I didn't mean to hurt her. I love her. I would do anything in my life to bring her back." I mean, honestly, it makes my stomach turn just hearing that. You love her, but you took her life in the most brutal way possible, threw her away like trash, and left her children orphaned? It is absolute, sickening hypocrisy. Following his exact directions, investigators drove out to a desolate, heavily wooded marshland. And there, just over 2 weeks after she first vanished into thin air, the search finally came to a devastating end. Right where Steve led them, police discovered Crystal's decomposing body. It's just heartbreaking. Against all odds, she had survived a horrific childhood and escaped a monster at 13, only to have her life stolen at 37 by the one person who was supposed to protect her. Steve thought the historic chaos of Hurricane Harvey would wash away his sins, but he couldn't outrun the truth.
Today at 2:45 p.m., Crystal's body was discovered, and Stephen Wayne McDowell, 44, has been arrested, charged with murder.
If it wasn't for Steve personally leading them into that marsh, investigators straight up admit they would have never recovered her body. The swamp would have kept that secret forever. And honestly, when you look at the timeline, it is absolutely mind-blowing how close he came to getting away with it. If Crystal had been reported missing just one single day later when Hurricane Harvey was slamming the coast in full force, this entire investigation would have played out in a completely different way from the very beginning. Think about it. The streets would have been flooded, chaos would have been peaking, and that Mercedes would have more than likely been stolen or completely washed away. And if the car vanished, the police would have never known to check the security cameras around that specific Motel 6. They wouldn't have been able to work backward, they wouldn't have caught Steve on tape at the gas station, and they wouldn't have tracked him to Walmart buying that bike. It makes you shudder, doesn't it? If the family had waited just 24 more hours to call the cops, who knows if this case would have ever been solved at all. Steve might be walking free today, while Crystal's children would be left forever wondering what happened to their mom. It was a race against a literal Category 4 storm, and by some miracle, justice managed to stay one step ahead of the weather.
New twist in that murder case in Houston, a mother of 2 vanishing just hours before Hurricane Harvey hit. Now, her ex-husband is under arrest.
Steve McDowell heads to court today, charged with first-degree murder. Not only do police say they found Crystal McDowell's body, but in a surprising turn, they say her ex-husband confessed.
Now police say after questioning her ex-husband for days, Steve McDowell tearfully admitted to murdering the mother of his 2 children.
Once I got that call, I was in a state of shock and denial. So just trying to deal with it the best way I can. I had my suspicions from day one. I can't say that I was honestly that surprised, given the arguments they had the week prior of her missing.
Wearing shackles, Stephen McDowell seemed to hold back tears as he appeared in court for the first time.
Everything in the investigation leads to us that he acted alone.
Police finally located the 37-year-old's body in a wooded area Saturday. The hurricane hampered the search effort. McDowell's uncle, Jeff Walters, had reported her missing.
Her parents died when she was young, and I guess I'm the closest one to her in the family. She's like my daughter.
Her autopsy was performed yesterday, and right now we still don't have a motive. Charlie?
Omar, thanks.
44-year-old Steve McDowell was officially charged with first-degree murder. But instead of owning up to what he did, Steve tried to pull one last desperate legal maneuver. He claimed that he had killed his ex-wife in a fit of sudden passion. Under Texas law, if you can prove a killing was a sudden, heat-of-the-moment reaction rather than planned out, it carries a much lesser penalty than premeditated murder. If this defense actually paid off, it could have resulted in him serving only a few years in prison. Like, are you kidding me? A few years? Steve actually got up on the witness stand and testified that the whole thing started because of a spontaneous emotional hug between them that somehow got out of control. I mean, wow. The absolute audacity to look a jury in the eye and call strangling your ex-wife a hug that got out of control. It makes my blood boil. Thankfully, the prosecution wasn't having any of it. They argued this was 100% premeditated. Steve was a man consumed by rage. He was angry that she was moving on with Paul, angry that she had cut him off financially, and furious that she had finally found the strength to leave his toxic grasp. And to completely destroy his sudden passion lie, prosecutors called the couple's own daughter, Maui, as a witness. Because of her age, she gave her testimony via a heartbreaking videotape. She described to the court exactly what happened that morning, exposing a reality that is just pure horror. Maui explained how her parents got into a massive, screaming fight. It was all about Crystal being with another man, and Steve was absolutely losing his mind over it. Crystal told him straight up, "I'm going to go away and take my children with me." That's when Steve snapped. He shoved Crystal onto the bed and snarled, "No, you're not." Little Maui then watched in terror as her dad started beating her mom. And then it gets even darker. Maui testified, "He glanced at me and was really mad at me, and Mom tried to say, 'Help,' but I couldn't hear her." During that brutal struggle, Maui watched her father place his hands directly over her mom's nose and mouth. She had to sit there and watch her own mother desperately suffocate. Once it was over, her dad ordered her to stay inside her bedroom and warned her never to tell a single soul about what she had just witnessed. Honestly, I can't even begin to wrap my head around the level of trauma that poor little girl went through. To see your own father do that, it is just unspeakable. Unsurprisingly, that garbage sudden passion defense completely tanked. The jury saw right through it. Steve McDowell was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. He won't even be eligible to taste freedom on parole until the year 2042. Reflecting on the verdict, Paul later stated, "I believe he knew exactly what he was doing. I think he knew the storm was coming in, and this would help cover his tracks." But then Paul added something that just breaks my heart. "I think I had a lot to do with his decision to do this, and I can't help but feel responsible for that." Oh, Paul. Honey, no. It is so tragic when survivors carry that kind of guilt. But we have to remember the only person responsible for this monster's actions is the monster himself. In the wake of the tragedy, the local community really rallied around the family, setting up various fundraisers to secure a future for the kids. One beautiful initiative was run by a local bakery called Cakes by Retta. Anytime a customer came in and ordered the Crystal Special, 100% of the purchase price went directly into a fund for Madden and Maui's future college education. Through the tears, her Uncle Jeff beautifully described Crystal as a light in the heavens that can never be extinguished. And her best friend, Bronze, shared a sentiment that I think strikes a chord with all of us. She said the hardest part of it all is knowing she'll never get another text, never get another phone call, and their kids will never get to grow up and have birthday parties together. It really makes you sit back and think, doesn't it? So many of the moments that shape our lives happen under the exact same assumption, that tomorrow will be identical to today. We just assume the same people will always be there for the birthdays, the holidays, the milestones, and even the setbacks. We blindly make plans for next week, next month, next year. And because we take tomorrow for granted, we rarely ever stop to imagine what life would actually look like without them. Until, just like that, it happens. Welcome to Edinburgh, Scotland's stunning capital. We're rewinding the clock back to 2010 to look into the life of 8-year-old Suzanne Pilley. Let me tell you, Suzanne was the definition of a ride-or-die daughter. She was incredibly tight with her parents, calling them multiple times a day. To her friends, she was that loyal, life-of-the-party person who was always down for a good laugh. She loved staying active, hitting up local festivals, and was a total bookworm, actively participating in several neighborhood book clubs. On top of that, she had a huge heart for community service, constantly volunteering around town. In 2004, she tied the knot with her longtime friend Peter Durand in a classic Vegas wedding. Even though they split in 2008, they managed to keep things totally drama-free and stayed just as close as they were before. But after the divorce, man, things took a turn. She ended up in a string of toxic relationships and moved around way too much. At one point, she actually got engaged, but had to call it off after uncovering her fiancé's heavy substance abuse issues. And as if that wasn't enough, the relationship right after that turned physically abusive. Honestly, looking at her history, you can totally see why she was just craving stability at this point. She needed a safe space, which is exactly why she took a job as a bookkeeper for a firm called Infrastructure Managers Limited, managing their accounts and payroll. Her coworkers openly praised her, calling her a model employee who was literally never late, never skipped a shift, and absolutely crushed her job. Cut to Tuesday, the 4th of May, 2010. At 8:19 a.m., Suzanne stepped out of her apartment on Whitson Road to catch her daily bus to the office. She hopped on the number 2 bus before switching over to the number 4 on Stenhouse Drive. That morning, she was rocking this super eye-catching, big bluish-purple coat, carrying a shoulder bag and a water bottle. By 8:49 a.m., she stepped off the bus to walk the final leg of her commute. Like most mornings, she popped into a Sainsbury's supermarket to grab some breakfast. Standard routine, right? She paid, walked out, and shot her dad a quick text. She also messaged her mom, thanking her for feeding her cat Mercury the night before, since Suzanne had slept over at her new boyfriend Mark's place. After hitting send, she started walking toward her office on Thistle Street, but she never made it to her desk. Knowing how insanely punctual she always was, her coworkers got worried and called her parents by that afternoon. Right away, her family knew in their gut that something was seriously wrong. By 8 p.m., Suzanne was officially reported missing. When investigators checked her apartment, everything was untouched. Her cash, her meds, her passport all right there. Her bank accounts hadn't been touched either. But here is the massive red flag that gave me literal chills. While her mom had covered for her the previous night, Suzanne hadn't asked anyone to watch her pets moving forward. For a dedicated pet parent, just abandoning your cat and your fish? No way. Like, who does that out of nowhere? Absolutely no one. It makes zero sense. And it immediately screams that something went horribly wrong right before she could step into that building. We are talking 100% foul play here. Detectives started combing through the area, pulling footage from 84 different security cameras. They spotted her easily, including one final, slightly blurry frame of her just seconds away from her office building. But here is the frustrating part, the blind spots. Because of how the angles were set up, the cameras didn't catch a single glimpse of her after that moment. And to make matters worse, there wasn't a single camera operating inside the office building itself. It's like she just vanished into thin air right at the finish line. I mean, how can someone be there 1 second, literally steps away from safety, and then just completely disappear?
Suzanne was captured on CCTV on May 4th, 2010, boarding a bus. She then bought some lunch in a local Sainsbury's before walking along Thistle Street to work.
The next morning, the police hit the ground running. They swarmed her office, tossed her apartment, and started knocking on the doors of nearby businesses. But the only immediate lead they had to go on? A taxi that had pulled over right near Suzanne's last known location, literally 5 minutes before her shift was supposed to start. Investigators didn't actually suspect the driver, but they were desperately hoping he might have caught a glimpse of something weird. But nope, he saw absolutely nothing. Nobody did. It's like the universe went completely blind for a split second. How is it even possible that on a busy morning commute, not a single soul witnessed anything out of the ordinary? It drives me insane just thinking about it. With the trail going cold, the cops started mapping out everyone in her inner circle, tearing into their alibis and digging up the details of her personal life. At first, they looked into her new boyfriend Mark, since she'd just stayed at his place the night before, but he had an airtight alibi and was swiftly cleared. But then, detectives uncovered a massive piece of the puzzle. Before Mark, Suzanne had been locked in a year-long, chaotic, on-again, off-again affair with one of her co-workers. Enter David Gilroy. Now, on paper, this guy looked totally legit. He had a decorated career, including 10 years in the Royal Navy, where he'd climbed all the way up to Chief Petty Officer. Currently, he was working as the regional operations manager at the exact same company as Suzanne. But behind the impressive resume, drama. David was married with 2 kids, and during a temporary split from his wife Andrea, he actually moved into Suzanne's place. People close to them described their months together as an absolute roller coaster, totally volatile and toxic. Honestly, when you've been through the ringer with abusive exes like Suzanne had, you can easily get trapped in that cycle where high drama gets confused with high passion. She probably kept hoping he'd finally choose her, you know? Even her ex-husband, Peter, weighed in on the situation, saying, "She mentioned that she had started seeing someone, but she never said who it was. I was a bit surprised she got involved with someone who was married because that wasn't the kind of thing she would do. But I can see how Suzanne might have been involved. She tended to buy right into things. When something came up which she wanted, she would be committed to it." On May 6th, David Gilroy was brought in for a grueling one-hour interrogation. He admitted they'd been messing around, but claimed their thing ended for good in December 2009. He said he'd moved back in with his wife and kids to fix his marriage, and that Suzanne had clearly moved on too. According to him, it was over. Case closed. But investigators couldn't help but notice fresh scratches all over his hands and arms. And get this, when they looked closer to take photos, they realized he had actually tried to cover them up with makeup. Like, oh my god, are you serious? Who puts concealer on scratches unless they're desperately trying to hide a struggle? David was supposed to be working the same day Suzanne went missing, but coworkers noted he rolled in late. Usually, this guy was totally calm and collected, but that morning he was visibly agitated, shaking and sweating bullets. His eyes were glazed over, and his pupils were completely dilated. A few people even spotted the scratches on him right then and there. As the search for Suzanne intensified, police suddenly got a call from David. But nope, it wasn't a helpful tip. He was calling to report a break-in. He claimed someone sneaked into his house while he was asleep and stole his phone and laptop. According to him, he and his wife heard a noise downstairs and found the back door forced open. Are we seriously supposed to buy that? What a wild coincidence. Just days after Suzanne vanishes, all his digital devices magically disappear? And why would a burglar only grab a phone and a laptop, leaving a ton of other valuables completely untouched? It makes absolutely zero sense. He obviously staged it to get rid of the evidence. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments if you see through this guy's lies too. The cops didn't have his phone anymore, but they successfully recovered all of Suzanne's phone data. And trust me, her text told a completely different story from David's version of events. Suzanne had sent him multiple messages calling things off and bragging about her new boyfriend, Mark. She even texted a friend saying she thought David finally got the hint. But despite that, she had seen him again over the weekend right before she disappeared. David had been completely suffocating her, sending hundreds of texts over just a few weeks, including a staggering 64 messages in a single day.
Hi Suzanne, David here. Give me a phone back, please. I just want to have a wee chat with you. See if you need a lot or anything. Just give me a phone back, even just for a couple of minutes. I'm worried.
On May 3rd, David went into overdrive, calling her, leaving a voicemail, and blasting her with 15 texts, including one claiming he'd love her forever. But here is the kicker that literally gives me goosebumps. After that day, the line went completely dead. Before May 4th, rarely an hour passed without David hitting up her phone. But after May 4th, absolutely nothing. Silence. If he supposedly cared so much, why suddenly stop checking in right when she vanishes? It's because he already knew she wouldn't answer. Everyone who knew them confirmed their relationship was a toxic roller coaster, completely ruined by David's aggressive bullying and intense, possessive behavior. Honestly, it's heartbreakingly clear why Suzanne tried to distance herself. She was dealing with a textbook stalker. Just before Christmas, she was so terrified that she completely changed her locks. And just a month before she went missing, David took things to a dangerous new level, hacking into her emails, throwing her belongings straight out of a kitchen window, and even stealing her phone.
Suzanne had been reported missing by her parents on the last day she was seen. Just over 2 weeks later, the police released a statement saying they were now treating her disappearance as a murder investigation. The next day, a search of the Argyle area was launched, spanning an area of 400 miles, as detectives leading the inquiry at the time appealed for information.
It had now been 2 long weeks since anyone last saw Suzanne, and investigators officially announced they were treating her disappearance as a homicide. A massive team of 20 detectives spent hours poring over CCTV footage from 250 cameras around the area, meticulously piecing together David's exact movements. He was their only person of interest, and they needed to track his every single step. Here's what they uncovered. Detectives could tell from those relentless text messages that David completely refused to accept that Suzanne was dumping him. So, he cooked up a plan to confront her on the morning of May 4th. David dropped his daughter off at school, hopped on a bus, and arrived at Thistle Street at 8:36 a.m. He logged into his work computer at 8:40 a.m., and then just hovered around the building, waiting until he spotted Suzanne walking toward the office. He somehow cornered her and convinced her to step into the underground parking garage. After what police believe was a heated confrontation, David killed her right there in the dark, likely by strangulating her. He then dragged her body into a hidden stairwell. And get this, between 9:15 and 9:20 a.m., he just casually walked into the main office, which was exactly when his colleagues noticed he was acting completely bizarre and sweaty. Even though he had taken the bus to work that morning, he suddenly started making a ton of desperate excuses about needing to go home and get his car. Before he left the office, David did something incredibly sketchy. He rescheduled a work appointment at a school from the end of the week to the very next day. This trip would require him to drive 130 miles away to Loch Gilphead in rural Argyll. He was originally supposed to go with a coworker, but he told them not to worry about it and that he'd handle it alone. It was such a pointless, unnecessary schedule change that made zero sense to anyone. Why rush to a rural school days ahead of schedule? Because he desperately needed a reason to drive far out into the wilderness with a trunk he needed to empty. After leaving work to grab his car, security cameras from a nearby shop caught him buying 4 cans of heavy-duty air freshener. He then caught a taxi to his mother's house, and she drove him to his own place to get his vehicle. He drove back to his office and made multiple trips down to the parking garage, where he eventually moved Suzanne's body into the trunk of his car. And this next part makes my blood run completely cold. That very night, after putting her body in his trunk, he went to a school concert and ate out at a restaurant with his wife and kids. Like, are you kidding me? How do you sit there playing the happy family man while a woman you murdered is hidden in the trunk of your car right out on the driveway? The absolute detachment is terrifying. The following morning, he took off for that rescheduled meeting in Loch Gilphead, finally showing up at the school he was inspecting at 4:30 p.m. But here's where his timeline completely falls apart. He had left for that meeting at 11:30 a.m., meaning there was a random 2-hour window during his drive that was totally unaccounted for. On top of that, his fuel consumption was astronomically high for that route. And it gets worse on his way back. A specific stretch of the road that should have taken less than 40 minutes took him almost 2 hours. Somewhere during those missing 5 hours is exactly when police say he dumped and hid Suzanne's body. On his way back to Edinburgh, he switched his phone completely off and briefly stopped to fill his car with gas. When forensic teams finally seized David's car, they noticed an umbrella that always sat on the back shelf had been moved into the trunk, meaning he likely shifted it out of the way when he forced Suzanne inside. They brought in specialized human remains detection dogs. While they couldn't recover viable DNA, the dogs flagged 3 distinct areas, 1 in the office parking garage and 2 in the back of his Vauxhall Vectra. The car also reeked of those strong cleaning products he'd bought. Further forensic testing on the vehicle revealed that the suspension, springs, and wheels were badly battered from driving over incredibly rough, unpaved terrain. Dirt and forest foliage trapped underneath the wheel arches heavily suggested he had driven deep into a dense woodland area.
We're appealing today for the sightings of around the movement of a vehicle. We're appealing to anyone who may have seen a vehicle on unclassified roads parked a forestry track or just off the road, and the vehicle we're looking for is a silver family saloon. Not asking, or I don't expect anyone to be able to give me any great detail about the vehicle, registration number as such. What's important to me is the sighting, it's the location of where that vehicle is parked. Suzanne was undertaking a normal journey to work on the 4th. Everything about the journey was normal. I've spoken to our parents today and we've discussed the progress of investigation and that we're coming through here to the Argyll Forest. We're satisfied that the progress of the investigation, and today I'm asking people, think about the circumstances, think about any sightings you have of a vehicle which may be unattended. There may be a single man within the vehicle, maybe standing around looking. Tell us about where that was. Suzanne's family have feared the worst, really, from the very word go, and so we've discussed with them this morning, and it's clearly they're very, very devastated. And this is it's not the news that they would want to hear, but nevertheless, they're supporting us.
A month after Suzanne vanished, 7-year-old David Gilroy was officially hit with charges for murder and breach of the peace. Surprisingly, he was released on bail. Investigators also tacked on charges for assaulting his wife Andrea between January 2009 and May 2010, along with making threats toward his 2 kids, though these domestic abuse charges were later dropped. But his violent streak didn't stop with his family. Another charge alleged that David had assaulted a man named Scott, straight up threatening to stab and kill him when Scott confronted him right outside Suzanne's apartment. Yet, despite all of this terrifying behavior, David's family and wife stubbornly stood by him. They actually claimed David was the one who broke things off and tried to distance himself to rebuild his marriage, spinning the narrative that Suzanne was the one obsessed with him. Like, seriously? The gaslighting is unreal. How can anyone look at a guy threatening to stab people and think, yeah, he's the real victim here? It makes me sick. Because of David's bizarre driving route and the heavy damage to his car's suspension, search teams focused almost all their efforts on the Argyle Forest Park area. Since this was right by where he booked that random, last-minute work trip, it was the most logical conclusion that he had hidden her somewhere in those woods. But trying to find her was a logistical nightmare. Based on where he drove and stopped during those missing hours, searchers were facing a staggering 400 square miles of territory. We are talking a massive, overwhelming expanse of brutal wilderness, steep, dangerous mountain terrain, and pitch-black, dense forests. Search parties poured everything they had into combing through miles and miles of land, desperately looking for any sign of Suzanne.
The rugged beauty of the Scottish Highlands, police have the mammoth task of searching this huge area of mountain and forest for the remains of Suzanne Pilley. The 38-year-old bookkeeper went missing 3 months ago. Relatives like Suzanne's father, Robert, are hoping a widening of the search operation this weekend will finally discover her last resting place.
I often feel that if I could put a closure to it, that maybe the grieving would be a little better, like, you know. But it's just one of these things that you never seem to be able to get to the end of it. You just take it day by day.
Volunteers and mountain rescue teams are set to join police who've already carried out an extensive search to no avail. A 47-year-old man from Edinburgh has been charged with Suzanne's murder.
Before long, the police had interviewed nearly 1,500 potential witnesses and gathered over 1,000 official statements, yet Suzanne was still nowhere to be found. The Crown Office assigned 3 prosecutors to the case full-time, openly admitting that bringing a case like this to trial was incredibly rare and challenging. They had to rely entirely on building a timeline out of circumstantial evidence, because they had 0 DNA, no direct forensics, and the hardest part, no body. David maintained his not guilty plea, and finally, in February 2012, he stood trial for murder and attempting to defeat the ends of justice. He chose to exercise his right to remain silent and didn't testify. The District Procurator Fiscal, which is just the title for a prosecutor in Scotland, stated, "The sheer combination of these physical pieces of evidence have a particular significance. And in this case, we were able to demonstrate to the jury that David Gilroy was in a jealous and possessive state of mind. All his actions before she disappeared and his actions after her disappearance shows she was murdered by him. David Gilroy was a deceitful and controlling individual who pestered Suzanne with hundreds of messages and then killed her when she told him their affair was over. The calculated steps he took in the minutes, hours, and days after her death to cover up his crime and maintain a front of normality reveals a cold and calculating personality. Andrea, David's wife, was actually called as a witness by the prosecution, but she was given the legal right to opt out of testifying if she wanted to. She chose to decline and step down from the stand. Instead, the prosecution laid out all the puzzle pieces for the jury: the relentless trail of CCTV footage, the physical damage to his car, and the damning phone records. But the real kicker? They brought in a forensic expert who testified that the exact location of the scratches and marks on David's body perfectly matched where a victim would grab someone while trying to fight off strangulation. Like, oh my god, that just sends chills down my spine. Can you imagine the terror? It makes total sense why the marks were right there. She was fighting for her life with everything she had, desperately trying to pull his hands off her throat. It's absolutely heartbreaking, but it left him with the one thing he couldn't erase: the physical proof of her struggle.
The former partner of Edinburgh woman Suzanne Pilley has been found guilty of her murder. David Gilroy always denied the charge. Detective Superintendent Gary Flanagan says it was a complex case to investigate.
The fact that we were looking at something which happened in the city centre of Edinburgh and travelled over to the other side of Scotland meant that we were looking at clearly a much bigger investigation. The CCTV was the backbone of everything else that we were able to do, so clearly it was significant. But the CCTV corroborated, if you like, added weight to all other investigations that we were able to carry out. So in a circumstantial case, it's a significant part.
It's believed Suzanne's body is buried in Argyll. However, despite extensive searches, she's never been found.
We've conducted over months and we've discussed with the Pilley family throughout all the different avenues that we've pursued. We've been pretty transparent with the public in terms of the areas that we've searched.
Officers insist the search for Suzanne isn't over.
We've given Rob, Sylvia and Gail an assurance that any information which comes to light that gives us a glimmer of hope, then we will pursue that information, but hopefully to a conclusion for them.
The parents, family and friends of Suzanne Pilley have welcomed today's verdict, but insist their fight to find her body will continue.
By a majority verdict, David Gilroy was convicted of murder and attempting to defeat the ends of justice.
For the first time in a UK criminal court, the public saw the judgment too, with the camera allowed to film the sentencing, something that we could be seeing a good deal more of in the future.
And in a historic legal first, permission was granted to film him being sentenced right there at the High Court in Edinburgh. This was a massive deal. It marked the absolute first time in UK history that news cameras were legally allowed inside a criminal court to film a sentencing for same-day broadcast. Honestly, it is so wild to think about the media circus surrounding that moment, but you know what? It felt completely necessary. The public needed to see justice served in real time, especially for a case that had gripped the entire nation.
Suzanne Pilley was obviously a respected and well-liked member of staff in Thistle Street in the office in which you and she both worked. In May 2010, she was starting a new chapter in her personal life, and that included bringing to an end her relationship with you. On the 4th of May, she set out to go to work. Then she just disappeared, and the jury were satisfied on the evidence before them that was because you murdered her and disposed of her body. On charge 6, the charge of murder, I sentence you, as I am required by law to do, to life imprisonment. I am also required to order that you serve a number of years as a punishment part of the sentence. Having regard to all the circumstances, I order that you serve a punishment part of 18 years, which will be backdated to 13 March 2012.
This statement will obviously be read on behalf of the Pilley family, and it's very much in their words. This day's been a long time coming, but finally Suzanne's received the justice she deserved. As a family, we continue to struggle to come to terms with losing her. We've lost our daughter, but her memory lives on in everyone who knew her. Suzanne was a devoted daughter, a supportive friend, and an exemplary colleague at work. She was a proud Scot who led a full and active life and enjoyed racing outdoors, always walking, cycling and keeping fit. We've been met with nothing but kindness from her many friends during this time of great sorrow. We'd like to express our gratitude to every police officer involved in the investigation and to Alec Prentice and his team for their efforts in bringing this case to a conclusion today. Although the trial has ended, our ordeal goes on, and we hope that one day we can lay our daughter to rest.
After he was sentenced to his 18 years, David moved prisons following threats from other inmates and was left with a broken jaw. The Criminal Court of Appeal threw out his appeal, and he also failed in getting his case reviewed by the UK Supreme Court.
Now, last month marked the 4th anniversary of the murder of Suzanne Pilley.
David, I just have to say this. Okay, it's finished.
That morning, he's been there waiting Suzanne arriving. It was clear that Suzanne had ended the relationship,
There's nothing you can see.
and clear that he didn't want the relationship to be over.
Justice had been done, but it felt so sad after that, because we weren't going to get back. Lying somewhere, and nobody knows, as if nobody loved her.
The investigation will never be closed until Suzanne's found.
I always say that the door's just ajar. It's not fully closed yet. And that's what I really like, to put closure on it for myself and the rest of my family.
She was such a happy person. We try hard to be happy.
David Gilroy's family kept pushing the narrative that he was innocent, openly hoping that what they called a serious miscarriage of justice would be overturned when he was finally granted a case review. But their efforts hit a total brick wall. They later claimed they were left completely shocked when they found out his review was officially closed and rejected. Tragically, in February 2019, Suzanne's father, Rob, passed away. It is just so heartbreaking to think about he spent his final years in absolute agony, leaving this world without ever getting the one answer he desperately needed, where his daughter was. Detective Chief Inspector Bob Williamson made a direct plea, stating they are just holding on to hope that someone from the public will realize a tiny piece of information they have might actually be the missing puzzle piece to bring Suzanne home. He emphasized that her family has shown incredible strength, enduring so much crushing grief for the past 14 years. Honestly, the mental toll on them must be unimaginable. Being able to finally bring Suzanne home and give her a proper, dignified funeral would mean everything to them. It would give them the closure they've been denied for over a decade. In 2024, the TV show Crime Watch released a brand new appeal on the case. Today, Suzanne's mother, Sylvia, and her sister, Gail, are still fiercely fighting to keep the searches alive, holding on to the hope that one day they can finally bring her home.
Extremely difficult to not know who she is and to not have later traced. She wasn't treated with any dignity in her death.
As of the production of this video, Suzanne's remains are still missing, and David still absolutely refuses to talk. But karma might finally be catching up to him, because his silence could directly tank his chances of getting parole. The Scottish government has proposed a powerful new bill called Suzanne's Law. Under the current rules, the parole board can choose to consider whether a criminal refuses to reveal a victim's whereabouts, but they don't have to. This new law changes the game, making it mandatory. Retired Detective Superintendent David Swindle, the legendary investigator who caught serial killer Peter Tobin, put it bluntly. It's quite simply, the concept is, no body, no parole. Scotland has never had anything like this before. England and Wales have Helen's Law. But this would be a massive, historic shift for Scottish families who deserve answers. Honestly, losing a loved one to violence is already a living nightmare, but not knowing where they are, that is a completely different level of psychological torture. You're just stuck in this agonizing limbo. Suzanne's sister Gail made a heartbreaking plea that truly puts things into perspective. She said, "We accept that Suzanne was murdered and believe that the person responsible is in prison, but we feel we cannot say a proper goodbye until her body is found." She explained that Police Scotland is fully committed to this case, but their investigation cannot truly end until Suzanne is found. Gail begged anyone who knows something to search their conscience and come forward. She said, "Not for our sake, but for Suzanne's. Please let us give her the burial and send-off she deserves." And honestly, she is so right. It is time to break the silence and finally bring Suzanne home.